isn't it better though now? I mean, David Fromm last week was telling me, chill out about this stuff. It's a fad. It'll go away. And you like, I mean, I love living in quote unquote diverse places. I mean, I love different groups of people, different cultures, but I also like different opinions, different views. That's what a diverse society also means, it seems to me. Now, but isn't it better now? I mean, don't we live in a better society than we did in 1962?
Oh, that's a very complicated thing.
I know it is.
I mean, you and I, although I'm sure life hasn't been exactly a total bowl of roses for both of us. I mean, are well positioned to profit from a diverse
Mm-hmm.
society and to profit from more interaction and more dynamism as opposed to more stability. But not everyone is.
In fact,
And
most people aren't, right? Most
yeah,
people
I think
like
that's right.
stability. They like
Yeah.
things to stay the same. Uh,
Yes. And I think there might be sort of a there might be just on principle something necessary to democracy about stability just because democracy requires intelligibility. And when things are moving too fast, an ordinary person really has a hard time you know, reading what's going on in society. What does all of this mean? There aren't really so many eternal verities as there used to be, or at least the verities that we have seem less eternal. And that makes it harder for people to govern themselves, and eventually um, uh, people may come to feel that people are not up to governing themselves. So I think that it's a destabilization. Dynamism is Dynamism can be destabilizing,
yes, it
and
absolutely can. And it can also
and
lead to reactionaryism, because if you push things too far, people are going to push back too far in some ways. I mean, you will create a dynamic in which people will react in ways that may not be their full selves, because they'll be engaged, because their world is being transformed in ways they don't fully understand and in ways they don't fully control at all. They feel it's completely outside their ability to control. Why can't we do better at explaining? I mean, it's very hard in mainstream media and so on, that actually the resistance to mass illegal immigration is not a function of racism. It's a function of one's own sense of one's own country, one's own sense of stability, one's own wages, one's own simple naive belief that a democratic society can indeed make a decision about who comes into its country and who doesn't. That's crucial to making a country meaningful. And I think that's a strong argument for controlling immigration, for slowing the pace, to emphasizing what I would call assimilation. I'm an old-fashioned melting pot guy that believes, in fact, we all, as an immigrant, but I come American. I'm much more American now than I was when I got here, as you could probably attest.
yes.
Chris knew me when I was a little slip of a thing prancing around Harvard in my bright powder blue jacket.
I, I don't remember the powder blue jacket, but I remember the Japanese sweaters.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Yes, I did have those. That's right. I forgot about that. Those kind of bright colored 1980s Japanese symbols on my T-shirts and things. Where we go with that? I just lost my train of thought going back to those old days. But yeah, no, I don't. The thing is, what I find so frustrating on the left is also what I think what Orwell found frustrating too. So many of my peers don't seem to have this core sense of patriotism, of nationhood, of like, this matters. It matters that we are in this community and not in that community. And there are borders that create that reality. And that our identity is fundamentally as Americans, not as our particular ethnic or identity group. And I'm just befuddled. I mean, one of some friend of mine said that borders are racist. And or the fact that my peers in England are absolutely apoplectic that we've changed some trading laws with the rest of continental Europe, as if it was the change of our entire society. Because some people, mainly working class people, but also lots of middle class people, just said, look, I'm tired of having everything well, not everything, but key questions in our democracy dictated by other countries, which is because we're not other countries. And where has that gone among the elite? I mean, why do they no longer identify with their own country so much? Or has that always been the case?
No, I don't think it's always been this way. I think it's a question. It's a function of elites' isolation from large tranches of the of the social order. I think that it used to be that any town or any city was really multifunctional. Wherever you lived, you'd have either, depending where you were, you'd have either farmers or industry, in the middle of the social hierarchy. And then you'd have a whole very diverse array of elites. There'd be doctors and lawyers and a local newspaper editor and the guy who runs the factory and the guy who owns the used car lot. And then at the bottom, you'd have a really mixed proletariat, you know what I mean? And they would be running in and out of your house and in and out of your business and up and down your street, and your children would be going to the public school with their children, who are, the daughter of the banker and the son of the kid on welfare, son of the guy on welfare. I think that we've got a couple of things going on. There is a lot of residential segregation. The invention of the automobile has made it possible for people to live in places where poor people can't reach, except for a class of servants, And the other thing is, our cities, we've had a sort of sorting, and our cities have wound up the places where the global economy happens. And so, and this is the thing that there's a great French sociologist named Christophe Guillouis who writes about the repurposing of urban space in France. So, but basically the old urban working classes, you know what I mean? Whether they get too poor to live in the city or whether they're just bought out at a if they own property and at a good price, they leave. They go back to, the small towns where they grew up, which are no longer really the small towns where they grow up. They're nowheresvilles. You know what I mean?
Because the elites of those small towns have moved to the cities, right? The next generation of elites have left their hometowns and they're here now.
And so these places outside of Paris there's just not a lot of economic dynamism there. And in the fact, the people in those cities can't even afford to come to Paris because they can't afford to live anywhere. In the case of Paris, and I'm leaning on the work of this sociologist Guillouis again. Either the rents are too high in the private housing, and the public housing is all occupied by immigrants. So there's really no way back in. They're locked out of the global economy. Now, to you and me, who play a role, however modest, in the global economy, a lot of these changes don't necessarily appear as disadvantages. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, my sense was
the people in Blue America, they don't tend to meet people who are outcasts from the global economy.
And it's a function of both right and left over the last, because the right's endorsement of global capitalism, of completely unfettered trade, and of course the internet, which can outsource work even more efficiently than the automobile could. I mean, which whole large numbers of your own employees are actually in India or in other parts of the world earning much lower wages.